Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Heavy Repping. My name is John Tron Davidson, and I'm here once again in our super best ultra hay fever test location in the southwest of England. So I recently joined the Players Pick podcast forum, which is run by Chris Johnson of Players Pick podcast, and a gentleman asked me if I knew anything about Frock Picks. Now, as it happens, he'd only seen one guitarist using Frock Picks, and that guitarist is Dave Martone. Now, Dave has been around quite a lot, and he's played with an endless laundry list of really heavy people like Joe Satriani, Michelangelo Beccio, Billy Sheehan, Jennifer Batten, Stu Ham, and so on. But I thought, on the off chance, seeing as he's the only person that had any information on Frock, that I would just shoot him an email and see what I could find out. As it happens, Dave very kindly sent me a video back and then agreed to do an interview. So for those of you who are in the fleet-fingered community, this is quite an experience, and it certainly was an experience for me. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dave Martone.
Good. Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time out to chat to me. Pretty intense.
This is your web, which is all picks. Is that what it is?
Yep.
Nice.
So it's the science behind them and where they came from and the makers and all that sort of stuff. So I'm really interested because of this. Like I say, is this guy? It's the Players Pick podcast. The reason why I got in touch with you. This lad said, "Have you heard about Frock?" And I tried. There's nothing, not a bean.
Nothing.
I've been online. He said, "The only guy I've ever seen using them is you." And I thought, well, I'll shoot you an email and see if you can enlighten me on it, because it's always good to learn things. So thank you very much.
Like zero it right down and then come right on down to this, and then there. I found them when I was 17 or 8. I lived in Canada and in a province called Ontario, and just outside of Toronto there was a steel town called Hamilton, and this place used to build guitars. Actually, he's pretty famous for basses called the F bass, the Furlanetti or Furlanetto bass. And for some reason I was across these picks that they had in there, just a little mom and pop shop, bought a couple. And from there, it was just all over, because they're like a gypsy. I didn't gypsy jazz pick. They were just a big pick, and I remember listening to, at that time, Yngwie, and he was using like a 1.14 or heavy. So I was like, where's the heaviest pick I can get? This was the heaviest pick I could get anywhere. So I'm like, well, then I'll get this, because there was nothing fatter than meters anywhere at that time. So I used it, and then I brought them to Berkeley when I went to Berkeley College of Music, and I turned a bunch of people like, hey, what's that pick, man? What's this pick? And so I was telling them I would put orders in, and then I would sell them out to my buddies throughout the school, until I found out that I got a message from the guitar clinic saying, hey, we're pretty much running low on stock. And the owner of the company, Mr. Frock, actually sold the business, and he melted or tore apart all of the mold machines. And that was the piece of information I got. I'm like, oh. And this information came to me maybe 15 years ago, too, 14 years ago. So at that point, I said, listen, whatever you have, anywhere, I'll buy every last one, every single one, anything. Yeah. Well, just send me every single thing. I don't care what it costs, just send it all to me. So I think initially they sent me around 85 picks is what they had. And that's a good amount.
It's a healthy.
And I think I still have about 60 left. Yeah. And I'm a middle-aged man at this point, so doing the math, I think they're gonna last.
Excellent. Oh, that's wonderful.
It's interesting because one of my other friends who was in Detroit is a mold maker. Hey, I saw that Frock thing you did. I'm the owner of this company, and I have the $300,000. We can tuck it in there. We can find out what it's made of. We can do it all for you. I'm like, really interesting. So I might take him up on that.
I mean, that was the thing I kept thinking to myself when you sent me the video, and you showed me the pics, and obviously I'm trying to work out, what they are. And the thing I kept thinking was at least 3 of them had been injection molded, and I thought that means that tool has to be kicking around somewhere. But if he destroyed the tool,
I don't know firsthand. That was told to me through the owner of the company. I don't know if he's telling me the truth. I tried to do researching Mr. Frock Picks years and years ago, and I remember I didn't really come up with any at the time either, I don't think.
Yeah.
So they must have been a niche company or maker or something of that nature. And I've been trying to find something close. And, I've been in touch with Vinny from V-Picks, and he sent me hundreds of different styles of picks.
Yeah.
And they're all wonderful. But, nothing has been this. And I have seen online some gypsy jazz stuff, but I didn't want to start getting into buying $30 a pick, $40 a pick. I'm like, I still got a stash. So at this point, I was just with that. I know where the stash is. Isn't a secret envelope that I showed you and everybody else. 2001 postmark. And I couldn't believe it said 2001 on it. I'm like, wow. Man, that was even before that because I moved to Vancouver around that time. So I was using them probably around 1992 starting, I think.
Yeah.
So long time. And I haven't really I use them but in the studio I'll just use some like regular picks because sometimes they're a bit too thick, so you can't really dig in hard enough for those big crunchy riffs sometimes, or too glassy, or too, I don't know what the word is. It's just they don't bite enough.
Yeah.
But for live, it's the only thing that I'll use pretty much.
Yeah, I watched a lot of your performance footage, and both the acoustic and the electric stuff. I know you mentioned in the video about how you were using them for you use them for certain situations and not in other situations, but it does seem, especially given how the speed that you're playing at and a lot of the material, that having picks that size, in my experience of it, that there's a lot less resistance from the strings that way, and especially if you're doing a lot of sweepy stuff, that it'd be more conducive to speed, I suppose.
I think so. I know I couldn't. I don't feel I'm not. I tried to be as efficient with it like a normal pick. It just doesn't feel right. I'm sure I could get used to it. And then I think if I look at people like, say, John Petrucci or Eric Johnson, they use those little jazz threes, and I've tried them, and it feels something in my hand because it's, of course, what you get used to, right, John? So, and those guys play incredibly liquidly fast, and John does all tons of sweeping, and Eric does his own thing. So what was remarkable to me is when I started getting into more gypsy jazz, I had these kind of picks. And I'm like, that's interesting, because there's this hand bounce that they have, and I've tried to adopt that just visually from looking at it. And I think my picking got a lot better from playing a lot of acoustic guitar. It didn't come from playing electric guitar, because electric guitar is too easy. It came from just I'll call it muscle car picking. Man, wood, nylon, pick. That's it. Go. You can't hide behind delay or gain or compression or distortion. It's just man or are you not? Can you pick it or can you not? That's it. And
sure.
From there, I think it really started to feel comfortable. It feels more comfortable, I think, on a string, almost an electric, because the strings are thicker, they're more taut, and then sometimes electrics, the strings are too boingy. So that's why I probably more of a hybrid pick on the electric than a full-on. But I think you're correct. It does lead itself to. There's another. You must know Troy Grady.
Yeah.
And he does all those wonderful analysis of the pick things. And I never knew about him before, and it's neat to see this guy that's become the science of picking of all these things, you know. So it's just become natural, and the different colors feel different too. There are 4 different colors, and I think I must have used the black up the most because they're the most gone. And I must have liked those the most.
Very slightly and softly off topic, there's a thing that I watched of your one of your instructional things from a long time ago, of you talking about hairband harmonics.
Oh yeah.
And you talking about, it sounds like I'm using the whammy, but I'm not. And I thought that was weird. I'm big into prepared guitar and stuff, so that was a really cool thing to see.
Thank you.
And it does. Thank you. Because you're playing in open tunings and stuff, you know. Oh, that was wicked.
Thank you. That was, you know, no one's ever done that before. And there's a lot of things on the guitar that people do all the time. And I've always just used it as a muter, just to mute, right? When tapping or whatever. But I never thought about using it as a harmonic capo. And so I wrote a song with that, and it was amazing. And one of the guitar magazines did a huge 8 spread page on the whole thing, first person ever to do this. And I'll probably write another song with it because no one else has and I can. Right? So pretty neat.
Do you play a lot in open tuning? Because I know you were playing in open G for some stuff.
Yeah, I was playing. That song is in not a lot. Usually it's third, or the thick string is dropped to a C sharp or a C or a B. Before there were 7s and 8 strings, and now you can just have the extra guitar to do that. Most of the time, I would say the electric stuff, it's mostly a standard tuning. However, doing a lot of the acoustic stuff that I do, there's a lot of different tunings going on there because it's fun, it's different, it's something new. It's neat, you know. It's refreshing, I guess. Refreshing is a good word.
When you're playing in standard all the time, you get used to doing things a certain, and going into other tunings makes a big difference. Especially when you're writing riffs and that, because all those movements they're just not in the same place.
And that's why that song in open G with the harmonic capo was so easy to write, because I didn't know what I was doing. You know, just what anything is. It's totally, I have no idea, and just go. You know, I think that's what a lot of people do too. You just go for it, listen to the sound, and see if you can create something from that, right?
You've done a lot of very fast work, and I know you use big picks and that because we've talked about that already. But for people who are into you and what you're doing, who like that sort of style, is there any advice you would give anybody on picking technique for that? I know we talked about economy picking a little bit, but
well, when I was playing, I just didn't. I think a lot of people, I've seen students make the mistake where I use a thicker pick, and they're just starting, they try and use a thick pick right off the top. And it's very clumsy, difficult, awkward. When I started to understand what I'm even doing, I was around 13, and one of my heroes was Eddie Van Halen. So what you do is you research, what pick does Eddie Van Halen play? And he played like the Dunlop 4-6, like paper. So
wow, that's really thin.
I had to use the Dunlop .46 because my hero used it. So that must mean if I use this pick, I can play like him. And
those are the rules.
Those are the rules, and that's what people think. If I use a pick like Dave, I can play like him. So my journey progressed from ultimately thin. I actually used a .38, the white Dunlop pick. Horrendous.
Wow.
Started from basically 0 all the way to 3.0. And that transition probably took 5 years. So my advice and what I have done, I would go to the music store and buy 5, 10 different size shaped picks and thicknesses. I would line them up on the table or on my knee, and I would play. And I would change the next pick, play, and the next pick, and play. And I would do this a lot until I zeroed in on 1 or 2 that go, this feels a little bit better than these other ones. That's an advice that I would give. Don't just use a 3mm because I use it, or don't use a .46 because Eddie Van, or don't use the Jazz 3 because John Petrucci uses it. You have to find your own dimension with what feels for you. And by trying different sizes, shapes, and sizes with your own, I think you'll come into at least the ballpark of what's going to kind of work at that point. I've done that, and that worked very well for me.
Was that the very first pick that can you remember what the very first pick was that you had? Was it the Van Halen, the .46 thing, or?
Yeah, it was probably the Van Halen Paint .46, because my dad, he was playing music well, and he had a bunch of picks around the house, just normal picks, medium, light, nothing heavy. They were all like light or medium. And there was always the Dunlop. Remember the gray Dunlop? And I guess it was a pretty famous pick. And so that was the first one. But even before I was using the pick, I was doing classical finger style way before that. So for at least 5 years, I was just using fingers, no pick.
Yeah.
And then after it came in, and a lot of to use a thumb pick, because then you could have all your fingers. And I'm like, you're right, I could, but there's so much to work on. I don't feel like I'm limited at this point yet. So, but it could be something down the line. I know one of my friends, I think Brett uses one now too as well. And I think ultimately whatever you need to get, and a lot of kids now are not even using pick, John. No pick. A lot of the Instagram people, no pick, fingers. Great. That's kind of like finger style electric, if you will.
Yeah.
And Jeff Beck's been doing it forever.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think ultimately whatever works best for you. I like the sound of both. I really do. Like if I'm recording a nylon guitar, it's just so much more expressive to use than a pick. It's just it's just so much more. But I'm not Paco de Lucia, and I can't do all that crazy stuff. So I have to resort to cheating and using a pick, so to speak.
Yeah, totally. It's a totally different discipline. The way like that nylon's so married to the sound of that technique. Um, did you find? Because I know you reading a little bit about your musical upbringing that you came from the classical thing, and I know you talked about using your fingers and everything like that. Did you find it a weird transition? Because I know you still do a lot of acoustic stuff. Did you find it an odd transition going from playing that? Because it's almost not the opposite, but the syncopation's different with the full hand,
It is.
with or without hybrid.
It is. It's totally different. I treated them both like a separate girlfriend, kind of like
Right.
you are over here and I like you, and you are over here and I like you. And so the longest time kept them separate, all separate. I never let the two girls meet. And then one day I let them meet. And then
Yeah.
started to use the combination of both of you know, and then it started combining it all, and then that felt so good because I had the strength of the pick, and then I had the strength of the classical. So at that point it felt effortless to combine the two, and then all of a sudden, instead of being separate, now it was one and the same. So if I'm playing sometimes a nylon string, it's very challenging to try and pull off techniques on the nylon string that you try and do on an electric. And the one trick is, if I'm recording, I will compress the hell out of the guitar nylon so I can get a little life out of the notes and get some stuff. Because a lot of the albums I have, there are a lot of lead breaks that are nylon string. And to be able to keep that up, I having the strength of playing the nylon, but also using the studio trick of a lot of compression on recording of that sound to keep it. I don't. It's very challenging. It's like it's the secret effect of a lot of acoustic guitar players, I think.
Do you, when you're doing your nylon recording, or I suppose even in a live setting, because I know you use Parker stuff a lot. I mean, you got a Parker just now, but do you use the Spanish Fly for live stuff, or do you try and? Because I know it's difficult to get this. It's difficult to get the sound without close miking nylons live, because sometimes they can sound a bit hard.
Yeah, I have been using a company called Cordoba guitars, and I think they still do, or did in the past build the models for the Gypsy Kings. So I'm using their GK Pro Studio. I was having a lot of issues with, I was getting something called a frozen shoulder. And what a frozen shoulder is, well, it's frozen. Like, you can't lift your arm over your head. You can't put your arm behind your back. You can't do anything. And I don't know why it was, but I think mine was partly due to playing, because I would sit all the time when I was performing. And then I would be sitting on a stool with one of my legs up and the other on the ground, so my torso was kinked. And then my arm was over top of all the time of the guitar. And I got, and I mean, John, like in the last years, sometimes per month, my highest gigs per month was 48 gigs per month. So repeat that.
That's a lot of work, man.
A bad month was 32 gigs a month. That's a bad month. So it was a lot. And then always in the gym. I was in the gym too. And I think it didn't happen instantly, but I noticed I couldn't lift or do the hell. So at that point, I started to stand. I saw some people and specialists, and I started to stand up, and I switched to the Spanish fly guitar that you were talking about. Super thin. So my arm wasn't cocked up, so now it was just down. And I was now properly standing. And the reason I actually started to play it was for therapy, of all things. And it was great. I had 24 frets. I could do all kinds of stupid stuff on it. However, you miss the acoustic chamber of the nylon string guitar. So important, especially like when you have a microphone inside and you're doing all the slaps and the taps on the body and these live. It's alive and it's wonderful. Whereas the Spanish fly could have the play dead and it's closed. So you have a little bit of both, where you have one's alive and doesn't play as well, but you have one that can play so well but it's dead. So then I actually put a strap on the Cordoba and started to play that standing, and all of a sudden I'm like, it's so weird, my arm was so far out of the body and that felt so uncomfortable, but over time it got more comfortable. But the whole thing was to keep, but now I can start to do that, but it took a year and 8 months, and it's still not 100%. It's one of those things, I've been playing a lot of times, and I find it very interesting that all of my mentors and heroes, like, say, Joe, Steve, all these people, how can they have such a long ever having issues? Anything. Yeah. I think they just don't talk about it because they don't want people to know about it, I think. And sometimes I want to post, oh my God, this blew out, but I'm like, well, I probably shouldn't do that, because then people think, what if I book his arm blows apart or something? So I keep it on the down low, except some people do know and they'll message me for some help here and there. Sports guy. You can't have some guy playing hockey for 40 freaking years going balls out to be the same as he was when he was 15 as he is when he's 48. It's impossible.
No, definitely not. That's a contact sport, right? That's some pretty hard hitting stuff, man. I've seen a couple of hockey games when I was in Canada, and they're not tickling those guys. They're really going in there. It's something else.
It's nuts. They got spears and they got blades on their feet, and the pucks are ripping by at 120 hour, and they're huge. They're like 6'8" and they're like 40 pounds jacked. It's insane. It's awesome. Because I played hockey all the way up until 19 years old. You have to play hockey. It's just the way it is. So it's great. I loved it. But then I stopped playing sports at that point because I realized, my hands were important. So I kind of let that lapse a bit.
Yeah. I know, obviously, you've got the Frock Picks, and I'm assuming you've had bits and pieces of other things over the years. But do you have a big collection of stuff?
Yeah, I do. There's every person has a big, huge fishbowl of and I have one large fishbowl in my studio in the vocal room, and it's on top of the headphone pre. And my kids like going into there and finding all the big picks. And those ones are mostly almost all it's a V-pick cemetery of all the trials that Vinny's been sending me, all the stuff. And I keep trying it, loving it. We got close with one, and it was the material. The material just didn't feel right. So, and I guess the material is an important thing besides just the pick. If it's not going to, like this material, it just sticks to my finger for some reason too.
When you're playing, do your hands get kind of damp, or do they stay quite dry?
No, it depends. It depends on the environment. Most of
Yeah.
the environments I'm in, they stay quite dry. If
Mm.
I am just giving it, and then I'm a drenched, drowned rat, then they get wet. But
Yeah.
most of it, I'd say they maintain pretty dry, and
Yeah.
I don't really have an issue with, I'll say, dropping picks, because I know they're $5 per pick, so I don't want to lose it. So
Yeah. For sure.
but in my studio right next door here,
Mm.
I have a nice treasure chest of ones that I use and ones from clients that have come in here. But there was one friend of mine named Toshi, and he had these. They're just like a medium to heavy pick, and it had some Chinese writing on it. And I recorded a lot of the rhythm guitars with that pick.
Mm.
And I guess it was, like I said, it was so different. It gave me more of the attack of that. So that one, I still go to that sometimes when I'm doing like rhythms on a Les Paul or whatever. I'll just, where's that Toshi pick? Where is it? And it's nothing special. It's just a standard, medium to heavy pick. And since it was a friend of mine's, and I enjoyed our friendship, it reminds me to play this pick when he's playing, because he plays so well that maybe it's a part of, I don't know, mojo.
Do you find that there's certain stuff, like you said with your Toshi thing, that certain picks lead you down certain paths, certain ways of playing because of the thickness or the material, whether consciously or subconsciously?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've never been asked that question in my entire life. That's a good question. Of course, you can answer that with guitars. It's very easy to answer that with guitars. But as an example, let's say I was using that .46 or .38 Dunlop pick. There's not a chance in hell I would be trying to play all of the acrobatic stuff, because I just know it wouldn't happen. Those are strumming picks. So I'm like, we're going to strum along some songs here. And I guess knowing that, you would be a product of your environment and go, okay, this is what I got. Or sometimes, it has happened. I know in my video to you, I said I never lose them. I have lost once. And I was on a gig somewhere way up in Whistler, where the Olympics were in Canada. And it was a winter gig, and I thought I had dropped it outside, and it was a white pick in white snow everywhere. And I'm like, and I was out there with my phone, where the f*** is this pick? God damn it. And I couldn't find it. So I actually just used a quarter through the whole night. And
necessity is the mother of invention.
I had to
Even at the tool Brian made,
I had to use something, and you know what? It is what it is. It's a first world problem.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So to answer your question, yeah, definitely I would play differently depending on what the pick is. But I think you would get used to it you just get used to it. Like, say you pick up one guitar and you play it for a while, you just get used to it, and you'll start to try things and it'll become more comfortable on it. I really think, I don't treat it as the holy grail. I used to, but I'm sure I can get used to anything at this point. At this point. When we were younger, we would have all these mantras, and I remember I used to have to use baby powder on my hands, and I would have certain things I have to do because I think it would make me play well. These people do these mantras before they play, and I think it helps people out psychologically, but I think it's all you just play. Sometimes people think of things as crutches, John, and oh, I don't have my sound. Oh, I don't have my cable. Oh, I don't have my reverb. Oh, I don't have my stool. Or I don't have my amp. I get it. I get it. Like, would the Edge sound like the Edge without a delay pedal? I don't know. Maybe.
I read a thing once about guitars from the Cocteau Twins, and he was saying that he had all these choruses and loads of stuff that accrued over the years. And he turned up to some gig when they were on tour, and he just had his guitar and nothing, because all of his riffs got delayed because it was coming over by freight or by air or whatever, and his gear didn't turn up. And he said, I had to just cobble stuff together before the show. And I got a chorus off a guy, just a Boss chorus, and he went into I think it was an AC30. And he said, I sounded as much like myself as I always had. And then realized that, but at the same time, it's a big part of your performance. You know, picking up these little things, especially with picks and that sort of stuff. Well, with guitars and pedals as well, but because it's a physical part of it. Like those Frock things, you didn't need to go and buy the whole stockpile of the thing, but there's something about it that draws you in and says, I know when I pick this up that I get this, and taking care of that mentally, if that's a thing that you know is certain as part of the performance, you don't have to think about it, you just get on with the job. You can worry about other stuff, like your front of house sound or whatever.
Very well said. It's one less thing to not worry about, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why today a lot of people are switching over to Kemper or Axe Effects or Helix, because it's always the same. It's, you're not dealing with the tubes of this Marshall, or the power tube on this one, or the preamps going down, or whatever. It's just kind of digitally, it's the same, which is comforting, as you were saying.
Saw a bit of your old stage setup, and I don't know if you're using the same stuff now, but there was like a Vox on there and all sorts of things. I think we were running three different heads or something like that.
Yeah,
Are you still doing that, or have you slimmed it down and talking about?
I have been predominantly, most of all of my work has been nylon string in the last while, and that's great. Here's an example. I did a gig recently. I was hired. They wanted me to do an hour showcase and do whatever I wanted. So I'm like, okay. It's nice to program the set. I always like to make it interesting for the listener. So I'll just say this for a second. On a tangent, I remember I was 19 and I went to see one of my heroes play in Toronto named Yngwie Malmsteen. And amazing. I really, really enjoyed his playing, his energy, his attitude. And I was pretty much first or second row in a little bar. And it was amazing. So the first 3 songs, I was just stunned. But after like the 7th or 8th song, I'm like, it's kind of all the same. I love it. I love it, but it's all the same. And then after like 15 songs, I was in the back shooting pool. And I'm like, why am I shooting pool when my hero's on stage playing guitar? What the f***? And it was just, I got annoyed with the amount of notes continually going and going. So when I program my sets, I think about that moment all the time. And I think about what would make people want to stay in the seat all the time. Mm. And for me, I think, well, I can play nylon, I could play textural electric, I could play blues, I could play country, I could play shred. So what I'll do is when I'm making a set for like a guitar thing, I'll kind of cover that all. So every song will keep the interest of the listener. So as an example, this is a long way to answer your question. I was doing a gig a couple months ago where I was doing this gig. And I brought an electric rig and I bought an acoustic rig. The electric rig was, yes, I used a Vox head with some pedals in front of it. And then I used, for my acoustic, just a little Bose preamp. That's it. So I figured, okay, let's start with the acoustic guitar sound check. Plugged in, check. Okay, 30 seconds, done. Sounded great. Perfect. Okay, going on to the electric. Sound checking. All right, put it on. Ground loops, cable problems, patching problems, AC problems. It took almost 1 hour to get this whole rig straightened out because of problems there was just problems. And I'm like,
yeah,
that acoustic guitar sound check was enjoyable. It was 30 seconds and I'm done. And I guess there's something in me that's like, I don't want to around with that crap anymore. I don't. it's and I hate it. I hate it. So I guess that's part of the bitterness of the technology sometimes, where maybe I should just go and buy a Kemper or a Fractal and just, that's it, and be done with it too. So I'm on the edge, teeter-tottering right now. I'm waiting for the time. There is going to be a release soon, hopefully, that's going to be very large for my career with a very famous band that I can't talk about yet. And when that comes out, it was supposed to come out late this summer, but with this virus, it just kind of sent everything down.
Yeah.
And at that point, I will contact the powers that be to say, hey, check this going on over here. I'm looking for some new sponsorship. So at this point, my electric rig is still using the Vox equipment. And, I'm used to the sound. It's older technology. It's a comfort sound. I'm used to it. But, these things are temperamental. When I move them around, they're in a rig and they're in a rack, but still, it's just, it frustrates me. It does.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I find pleasure in that pure pick, wood, nylon. That's it.
You've been at this for a couple of years now. I think you've earned a couple of years, and I think you've earned the sort of right to say, I just kind of want to do it like this. Why does it have to be so difficult?
And recently, in the last 2 or 3 days on my social media, I put it out there. I picked up the electric, I plugged it in, I played a little solo back from one of my first albums in 1995. I was like, bam! I posted it. I'm like, okay, since we're all sitting here bored out of our minds, here's something I did back then. If anybody wants to hear any parts of any songs from my albums, so I can start to blow all the rust off my electric guitar, please let me know. And all of a sudden,
yeah.
I'm like, this is great. This is exactly what I was hoping for. And now there's a lot of hard stuff that I have to try and remember how to play, which is good because I have the time to do that. And then some other people said, well, why don't you just put that energy into writing new stuff? I'm like, good point. Great point. But let me get all the rust worked out on the electric first. Won't take that long. And then once I have the things oiled and lubricated, then it'll be easier to navigate the new. I'm using it as a vehicle to springboard into the next phase, I guess.
Yeah.
So there's your answer on the rig that I use.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm a little bit nervous coming in to have a chat with you.
Oh, it's all good. You feel good now, right?
Yeah. No, it's soon once we got the first little chat out of the way, it was fine. Really appreciate your time, man. Like,
you're
genuinely.
welcome. You're welcome. It's
no technical issues.
Yeah, and I'm glad we got them sorted out. That's for sure. Because there's nothing worse to ruin something than technical issues. So, for me, I could sit there and write an email, but I just didn't want to. I spend so much time sometimes on a computer. It's easier just to talk because then I could tell a story where if I'm writing, I'm like, it's too long. I'm not going to tell that story. Whatever. This is this. So this way, you get more out of it.
It was at this juncture that the internet decided it had had enough of our endless pick chat and decided to shut us both down. But I'd like to extend a massive thanks to Dave for his time and for talking me through his rig and his picks and his approach to playing and all that sort of stuff. And I hope that was of help to all of you. So please do go and check out Dave's stuff at the site in the description, and go and follow him on Instagram and socials and all the rest of it. He's a scorching player and a really nice bloke with a big beard, which I appreciate very much. So I hope this has been an enjoyable experience for you. It certainly was for me. My name is John Tron Davidson. This is Heavy Repping, and I shall see you soon. So just remember, if you're not sure what to do in life, rep hard and rep heavy.